Dust never settled on Vale. The mining colony sat on a rocky moon where 3 suns baked the ground all day, and the drills never stopped. Ships from a dozen worlds came here to dig out rare metal, and workers from just as many species walked its tunnels. Among them were humans, the newest and smallest group in the galaxy, mostly given the worst jobs and the least respect. Daniel Ferris was one of them. He had once been a soldier, part of a small human defense force that guarded trade routes years ago. A tunnel collapse during a rescue mission had crushed his leg and ended that life. Now he limped through the mining camp with a cart, hauling broken rock away from the drill sites. The other workers barely looked at him. The alien overseers called him the slow one and gave him the jobs nobody wanted. Daniel did not complain. He had learned that complaining changed nothing. Instead, he found small ways to keep some kindness in himself. He fed the strange, 6-legged rock lizards that lived near the tunnel mouths. He gave water to injured workers when the medics were too busy. Nobody noticed these things. He did not do them to be noticed. That morning, an alarm rang through the camp, different from the usual drill warnings. Word spread fast. A tunnel had collapsed further down, revealing a cavern nobody knew existed. Inside it, workers found bones, old stone carvings, and something that made every supervisor on the moon stop what they were doing. A nest. Not just any nest. Scholars who arrived within hours confirmed it belonged to a species thought extinct for centuries, sky dragons. Ancient records spoke of them as creatures of immense power, able to bond with a single living being for life. Once bonded, both dragon and partner shared strength, speed, and a strange deep connection that let them sense each other's feelings from far away. A bonded dragon rider was said to be worth an entire army. Most of the eggs in the nest had turned to dust long ago, but one egg remained whole, glowing faintly with a soft light, resting untouched in a bed of old stone. The scholars said it was somehow still alive, waiting. Word of the discovery spread across star systems within a day. Every major power in the region sent someone. Warriors, generals, princes, and champions from a dozen species began arriving on Vale, all hoping for the same thing: to be the one chosen when the egg hatched. The mining company that ran Vale saw an opportunity too. They announced a grand choosing ceremony, inviting every faction to send their best warrior. Whoever the hatchling bonded with would gain enormous power, and whichever government they served would gain enormous influence. The whole moon buzzed with excitement. Ships packed the landing pads. Camps of soldiers in shining armor set up near the cavern, each one certain their champion would be the one. Daniel heard about all of this the way he heard about most things, secondhand, from other tired workers complaining about extra guard duty. He had no interest in champions or ceremonies. His job that week was simple: clear rubble from the site so the important people could walk through without getting their boots dirty. He was given a warning by his supervisor, a broad-shouldered alien named Grath, who jabbed a clawed finger at him. Stay out of the way. Do not speak to anyone important. Do not even look at the egg. Understand? Daniel nodded. He always nodded. It was easier. On the day of the ceremony, Daniel pushed his cart along the edge of the cavern, keeping his eyes down as instructed. Around him, the space had been transformed. A raised platform stood at the center, draped in banners from a dozen worlds. Guards in polished armor lined the walls. Champions stood in a long row, each one boasting weapons, medals, or trophies from past battles. Cameras from news networks across the galaxy hovered overhead, capturing every moment for audiences light years away. At the heart of it all sat the egg, resting on a cushion of dark cloth, still glowing faintly. Daniel glanced at it once, just once, as he passed. It seemed almost to glow brighter for a heartbeat, though he told himself it was his tired eyes playing tricks. He kept moving, hauling his cart of broken stone toward the exit tunnel, careful to stay far from the crowd of dignitaries and warriors. Nobody paid him any attention. That was fine. He preferred it that way. Behind him, a hairline crack began creeping across the surface of the egg, so small that none of the officials watching from the platform noticed it yet. But something inside did. Something small, curious, and very much alive stirred within the shell, sensing the crowd of proud strangers around it. It sensed strength. It sensed pride. It sensed ambition. None of it interested the creature at all. Instead, faintly, from somewhere at the edge of the cavern, It sensed something else entirely, a tired heartbeat, steady despite pain, moving quietly away from all the noise. The egg cracked a little further. The ceremony was about to begin, and nobody in that cavern, general or worker, human or otherwise, had any idea how differently it would end. Trumpets made of hammered metal sounded through the cavern, echoing off walls that had not heard music in centuries. The choosing ceremony had officially begun, and every eye in the room turned toward the cracking egg resting on its dark cushion at the center of the platform. The champions stood in a long line, each one representing a different world. There was a heavily armored warrior from a mountain clan, carrying an axe passed down through 11 generations. Beside him stood a sleek, fast-moving scout famous for winning 100 duels without losing one. Further down the line waited a decorated fleet commander, a champion wrestler twice the height of a human, and even a young princess trained since birth to inherit her family's throne through combat skill. Each of them had been chosen by their governments as the very best their species could offer. Each of them believed, with total confidence, that the egg would choose them. The shell finally split apart with a soft crack, and a small creature tumbled out onto the cushion, blinking against the light. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The hatchling was smaller than expected, no bigger than a large cat, with sleek scales that shimmered pale gold near her spine and soft teal along her wings and belly. Her eyes, large and curious, glowed faintly amber as she looked around at the enormous cavern full of strangers. She was beautiful, and everyone could see it. But more than that, everyone could feel the quiet hum of power radiating from her, even at this tiny size. This was no ordinary animal. This was something ancient and rare, fully aware of the moment she had just been born into. An old scholar, wrapped in ceremonial robes, stepped forward and spoke into a floating microphone so the whole gathering could hear. The choosing begins. Each champion will approach. The hatchling will decide. One by one, the champions stepped forward. The mountain warrior knelt first, laying his ancient axe at the hatchling's feet as an offering. She sniffed at it curiously, then turned her head away, uninterested, and shuffled back toward the center of her cushion. The scout approached next, moving with practiced grace, speaking in a smooth, confident voice about the duels she had won. The hatchling watched her for a moment, then let out a small huff of air and looked past her, scanning the crowd instead. The fleet commander tried offering a medal. The wrestler tried flexing his enormous arms to show his strength. The princess knelt gracefully and spoke soft, practiced words about honor and partnership. Each time, the hatchling's response was the same. She would look, sniff, consider for a moment, and then turn away, curling tighter into herself. Murmurs of confusion spread through the crowd. Then confusion turned into mild embarrassment among the officials organizing the event. By the time the 10th champion had been rejected, whispers began circulating that perhaps something was wrong with the hatchling. Perhaps the ancient bonding instinct had weakened after so many centuries. Perhaps she was, as one frustrated general muttered, defective. The old scholar tried to calm the growing unease, insisting the process simply needed patience. But patience was in short supply among proud warriors used to being chosen for everything in their lives. At the edge of the cavern, far from the platform and completely unaware of the drama unfolding, Daniel Ferris pushed his cart of broken stone toward the exit tunnel. His job was simple: keep the debris moving, stay quiet, stay out of sight. He had done this task 100 times before, and he barely thought about it anymore, focused instead on ignoring the ache in his bad leg. As he maneuvered the cart around a support beam, one of the larger stones shifted and tumbled off the edge, landing with a loud clatter far closer to the ceremonial platform than it should have. Several guards turned sharply. Daniel froze, immediately lowering his head. "Sorry," he muttered quickly, already moving to retrieve the fallen stone before anyone could scold him. He crouched, ignoring the sharp twinge in his leg, and reached for the rock. That was when the sound cut through the cavern. A small, sharp chirp, followed by the scrape of tiny claws against stone. Every head turned. The hatchling had leapt clean off her cushion, wings flapping awkwardly for balance, and was scrambling across the platform floor with surprising speed, weaving directly past the stunned champions still standing in their formal line. Guards moved to intercept her, unsure what was happening. The The scholar called out in alarm, but the hatchling did not stop. She hopped down from the platform entirely, crossed the open floor of the cavern in a blur of gold and teal, and came to a sudden stop directly in front of the kneeling, startled laborer holding a chunk of broken stone. Daniel looked up, utterly confused, straight into a pair of glowing amber eyes staring back at him with unmistakable interest. The entire cavern fell silent. For a long moment, nobody in the cavern moved. Daniel knelt frozen on the stone floor, the broken rock still in his hand, staring at the small creature standing inches from his face. Her amber eyes studied him closely, tilting her head one way, then the other, as if trying to understand something the rest of the room could not see. "Move away from it," a guard barked, striding forward with his weapon half raised. Slowly, Daniel began to shift back, unsure what else to do. The moment he moved, the hatchling let out a sharp, distressed chirp and pressed herself against his injured leg, wrapping her small body around it and refusing to budge. Her wings flared out protectively, and a low hum came from her chest, somewhere between a growl and a whimper. "She is frightened," the old scholar called out, hurrying down from the platform as fast as his robes allowed. "Everyone stay back. Do not startle her further." The guard lowered his weapon slightly, but kept his eyes on Daniel with clear suspicion. "Why is it clinging to a laborer?" Whispers turned into open muttering across the crowd. The champions who had just been rejected stood stiffly, their pride bruised in front of cameras broadcasting the moment to a dozen worlds. Officials from several delegations began arguing amongst themselves, some insisting the hatchling had simply panicked and needed to be gently separated and reset before trying again. Two officers stepped forward and attempted exactly that, reaching down to lift the hatchling away from Daniel's leg. The moment their hands touched her scales, she shrieked, a piercing sound that echoed through the cavern, and small sparks of pale gold light crackled across her body in warning. One officer yanked his hand back, hissing in pain from a mild static shock. "Stop," the scholar shouted, pushing through the crowd with surprising urgency. "You cannot force it. If a bond has already begun to form and you tear them apart, it can kill her. It may kill them both." That single sentence silenced the cavern faster than any trumpet had. Daniel, still kneeling awkwardly with a dragon wrapped around his leg, looked up at the scholar in confusion. "Bond? I did not do anything. I just dropped a rock." The scholar knelt down carefully a few feet away, studying the hatchling with careful eyes. The old texts say dragons do not choose based on strength or status. They choose based on something else entirely, something instinctive, something even we do not fully understand. It seems she has made her choice. "That is absurd," snapped one of the delegation leaders, a broad-shouldered commander whose champion had been the very first rejected. "He is a laborer, a cripple. He has no rank, no honor, nothing to offer a creature like this." Daniel said nothing. He had heard worse said about him before, and arguing never changed anything. He simply looked down at the small creature still curled protectively against him, her chest rising and falling rapidly, clearly still frightened by all the shouting. Slowly, carefully, not really thinking about what he was doing, Daniel reached out and rested a hand gently on her back. She flinched at first. A warmth spread through his palm, faint at first, then stronger, traveling up his arm like a gentle current. He gasped softly as something shifted deep inside him, a strange awareness blooming in his mind that had not been there a moment before. He could feel her, not just see her or touch her, but actually feel flickers of what she felt. Fear fading into a soft golden light passed between them, visible even to those watching from a distance. The scholar's eyes widened. "The bond has sealed," he announced, his voice carrying across the stunned cavern. "It is done. It cannot be undone." Murmurs of disbelief spread outward through the crowd like ripples on water. Some officials looked furious. Others looked simply stunned. Daniel looked down at the small creature, now nuzzling gently against his hand, her earlier fear completely gone, replaced by something that looked— "What do I even call you?" he murmured quietly, mostly to himself. She chirped softly in response. "Wisp," he said finally, the word coming to him without much thought. It suited her, small and quick and unexpected. "I will call you Wisp." He had no idea yet just how much trouble this small, glowing creature was about to bring into his life. News of the failed ceremony spread across the galaxy faster than any of Dreesvale's mining ships could travel. Within a day, every major news network was replaying the same footage. A golden dragon hatchling ignoring kings and champions to bond with an injured human laborer nobody had ever heard of. Some networks called it a miracle. Others called it an embarrassment. Many of the alien delegations that had sent their best warriors called it something else entirely. Unacceptable. Daniel was given a small room near the edge of the camp, away from the general worker housing, supposedly for his own safety. Wisp refused to leave his side for even a moment, curling up beside him at night, following his every step during the day, chirping unhappily whenever guards came too close. She had grown slightly already, her wings a little stronger, her scales a touch brighter, though she still fit comfortably in his arms. Grath, his old supervisor, appeared at his door on the second morning, looking deeply uncomfortable. You are being summoned. Several delegations are requesting your presence. Officially, it is a discussion. Unofficially, I would not trust any of them. Daniel understood the warning clearly enough. He picked up Wisp, who immediately settled against his chest, and followed the guards through the camp toward one of the larger administrative buildings. Inside, several delegation leaders waited, their expressions ranging from cold politeness to open hostility. The commander whose champion had been rejected first spoke immediately, not bothering with pleasantries. This bond is a mistake. The creature clearly panicked during the ceremony and attached itself to the nearest convenient body. It should be corrected. Corrected how? Daniel asked quietly, keeping his voice steady despite the tightening feeling in his chest. Another delegate, sharper and colder, answered instead. There are methods. Sedation, controlled separation. With enough time and the right specialists, a new bond can sometimes be encouraged with a more suitable partner. Wisp, still resting in Daniel's arms, let out a low warning growl the moment the word separation was spoken, her small body tensing. Daniel felt her fear ripple through the strange connection between them, sharp and immediate. No, Daniel said simply. The commander's expression darkened. This is not your decision alone, laborer. You represent an entire species suddenly holding power none of you have earned. Do you understand what you are risking by refusing? Daniel held Wisp a little closer. I did not ask for this. I did not do anything except drop a rock. But she chose. You said yourselves that forcing it apart could kill her. I will not risk that just because it makes people uncomfortable. The meeting ended in cold silence, and Daniel returned to his room with a growing sense of unease. That unease proved justified 3 nights later. He woke to the sound of his door being forced open, several armed figures moving quickly into the room. Wisp startled awake instantly, letting out a piercing shriek of alarm as 2 of the intruders grabbed for her directly. Daniel moved without thinking, pulling her back and putting his own body between her and the attackers, ignoring the sharp pain flaring through his bad leg as he twisted awkwardly to shield her. Stand down. One intruder ordered, raising a small device clearly meant to sedate the young dragon. This does not need to be difficult. Wisp screamed again, and this time, something changed. A burst of pale golden light erupted from her small body, crackling outward with surprising force. One intruder was thrown backward into the wall, his sedation device sparking and dying in his hand. The second stumbled back, shielding his eyes from the sudden brightness. Daniel stared down at Wisp in shock. She was trembling, clearly frightened and exhausted by whatever she had just done, but her wings remained spread protectively in front of him, small wisps of golden light still curling off her scales like smoke. Shouts echoed outside as camp security finally arrived, drawn by the noise. The intruders fled quickly into the dark tunnels before they could be caught, leaving behind only the sedation device and a badly shaken laborer holding a trembling hatchling. Word of the attempted kidnapping spread through the camp within hours, and from the camp to the wider galaxy within a day. Whatever sympathy the delegations had hoped to gain vanished entirely. Instead, a new narrative took hold across a dozen worlds. A human laborer, dismissed and forgotten by his own people, had been attacked for refusing to give up a creature that had chosen him freely, and that creature had defended him with real, growing power. The mining company, suddenly aware of the public attention now focused on Dreesvale, moved quickly to distance itself from the scandal. Within days, an emergency tribunal was announced, made up of representatives from every major delegation, meant to formally decide what should be done about Daniel Ferris and the dragon who refused to leave him. Daniel sat in his small room that evening, Wisp curled tightly against him, still recovering from whatever she had unleashed. He stroked her scales gently, feeling her exhaustion echo faintly through their bond. "We are going to have to go in front of all of them, are we not?" he murmured. Wisp let out a tired, unhappy chirp, pressing closer against him. Daniel did not sleep much that night. The tribunal hall on Dreesvale had never been used for anything this large before. Rows of seats climbed toward a high ceiling, filled with representatives from every delegation that had sent a champion to the failed ceremony. Cameras hovered near the walls, broadcasting the event to worlds Daniel had never even heard of. He stood near the center of the room, Wisp resting quietly in his arms, her earlier exhaustion replaced by a calm, watchful stillness. A panel of judges sat at the front, drawn from several species, tasked with deciding what should happen next. The lead judge, an elderly alien with pale, patterned skin, opened the proceedings with a simple question directed at Daniel. "You are aware many believe you are unfit for this bond. You hold no rank, no title, no military honor. Convince this tribunal why you should be allowed to keep it." Daniel had expected the question, but it still made his stomach tighten. He was not a skilled speaker. He had never needed to be. "I did not ask for this," he said honestly. "I do not have anything special to offer. I am just a worker with a bad leg who happened to be standing nearby. I cannot tell you why she chose me. I can only tell you that when they tried to take her, it hurt her, and I was not willing to let that happen." Murmurs rippled through the hall. The commander from before, still bitter over his champion's rejection, rose immediately. "Sentiment is not evidence of worth. This tribunal was told the bond forms through instinct, not judgment. That instinct clearly malfunctioned." Before the judges could respond, the old scholar who had first identified the bond stepped forward from the side of the room, carrying an ancient data tablet retrieved from deep archives on a nearby scholarly world. "With respect, Commander, I would ask the tribunal to consider evidence, not assumption." He explained what his research had uncovered in the days since the ceremony. Ancient records, long dismissed as myth, described the bond not as a reward for strength or status, but as a response to something far rarer, genuine sacrifice offered without expectation of reward. The scholar revealed something Daniel himself had never spoken about publicly, a record buried deep in old military files. Years earlier, during a border skirmish, Daniel had been part of a small unit escorting an alien diplomatic envoy through hostile territory. When their transport was ambushed, Daniel had stayed behind alone to hold off attackers while the envoy escaped, an act that cost him the use of his leg and nearly his life. No medals had followed, no recognition. The mission had been quietly buried by his own government for political reasons, and Daniel had simply been discharged and forgotten, eventually finding his way to Dreesvale's mining camps out of necessity. The scholar looked toward the panel. He gave everything he had for a stranger and received nothing in return, not even acknowledgement. If the old texts are correct, that is precisely the kind of selflessness a dragon senses, far more clearly than any medal or title. The hall fell into stunned silence. Daniel felt heat rise in his face, uncomfortable with the sudden attention on a memory he had buried long ago. The commander, refusing to accept defeat so easily, opened his mouth to argue further, but he never got the chance. A sharp mechanical whine cut through the hall, followed by a flash near the judge's platform. One of the commander's own aides, standing near the panel under the guise of technical support, had planted a small device meant to disable the hall's systems and create chaos, likely hoping to force a forced separation during the confusion. Before guards could react, Wisp shot from Daniel's arms with a burst of speed, wings snapping open as she crossed the hall in a blur of gold and teal light. She slammed into the device just as it activated, absorbing the resulting shock with a sharp cry of pain, sparks scattering harmlessly across the floor instead of the judge's platform. Daniel rushed forward instantly, gathering her trembling body back into his arms as guards seized the stunned aide. Wisp whimpered softly, singed but unharmed, pressing her head weakly against Daniel's chest. The lead judge rose slowly, staring at the scene with something between shock and quiet understanding. She protected this tribunal at cost to herself, moments after being asked to justify her own choice. I believe she has answered the question far better than words could. One by one, the judges conferred briefly, then delivered their verdict. The bond between Daniel Ferris and the hatchling was declared legitimate, sacred, and untouchable under galactic law. Any further attempt to separate them by force would be treated as a serious crime. The commander was led away for his aide's actions, his reputation in ruins. The hall slowly emptied, delegates murmuring among themselves, many casting Daniel entirely new looks, equal parts curiosity and quiet respect. An official offered Daniel compensation, housing, even a formal title in recognition of the outcome. Daniel shook his head gently, still holding Wisp close. "I do not need any of that," he said. "I just want to keep her safe and be left in peace." Wisp let out a soft, tired chirp of agreement, and for the first time since the ceremony, Daniel allowed himself something close to a smile. 6 months changed more than anyone on Dreesvale expected. Wisp had grown from a creature small enough to cradle in 2 arms into one now large enough for Daniel to lean against comfortably, her wingspan stretching wide enough to cast real shade over the camp when she stood in the afternoon sun. Her scales had deepened in color, pale gold along her spine, now streaked with rich teal patterns down her wings, catching the light beautifully whenever she moved. Daniel had changed too. The limp that had followed him for years had eased noticeably, not gone completely, but no longer the constant weight it once was. The scholar believed the bond's energy, flowing quietly between them, had slowly been repairing old damage neither of them fully understood. More than the physical changes, though, something in Daniel's posture had shifted. He walked a little taller now, spoke a little more freely, no longer flinching automatically whenever someone in authority looked his way. The camp itself had changed as well. Word of what happened during the tribunal had traveled far, and slowly, carefully, attitudes across the wider galaxy had begun to shift alongside it. Reports and documentaries examined Daniel's forgotten military record, the quiet sacrifice buried for years by his own government, and the story resonated in ways nobody at the mining company had expected. Other worlds, curious rather than dismissive now, began sending scholars and diplomats instead of soldiers and champions, eager to understand more about humans, a species they had underestimated for far too long. Not everyone was pleased with these changes. The commander whose ambitions had been ruined during the tribunal had lost his official position, but he had not lost his allies. Rumors reached the camp of a private raiding force being assembled off-world, funded quietly by delegations still bitter over losing their chance at a dragon bond. Their goal was simple and brutal: strike Dreesvale directly, overwhelm its limited defenses, and seize Wisp by force before galactic law could intervene again. The attack came at dawn, 3 unmarked ships descending fast toward the mining camp, weapons already charging before they landed. Alarms blared across Dreesvale, workers scrambling for shelter as armed raiders poured out, moving quickly toward the central housing district where Daniel and Wisp were known to stay. Daniel woke instantly at the sound, Wisp already on her feet beside him, a low growl rumbling deep in her chest. Through their bond, he could feel her fear twisted together with something fierce and protective, an instinct sharpened by everything they had already survived together. "Stay close to me," Daniel said quietly, though he barely needed to say it at all. She already was. Outside, chaos spread quickly as camp security scrambled to respond, badly outmatched by the sudden, organized assault. Daniel moved through the panic with unexpected clarity, years of old military training returning to him despite the rust of time. He guided frightened workers toward shelter, using his knowledge of the tunnels to lead them away from the fighting, while Wisp stayed close, using bursts of golden light to disable raider equipment and shield anyone caught in the open. When a group of raiders finally cornered them near the old ceremony cavern, clearly intent on capturing Wisp regardless of the cost, Daniel did not run. He grabbed a length of pipe from a nearby supply cart, positioning himself firmly between the raiders and the dragon who had chosen him. "You will not take her," he said simply, voice steady despite the danger. Wisp answered by rising to her full height beside him, wings spreading wide, golden light building rapidly along her scales. What came next was not the desperate burst of a frightened hatchling. but something far stronger, a controlled wave of light and force that swept the raiders backward, weapons torn from their hands, armor scorched but not destroyed. She had learned control over the months, and now, defending the one person who had ever simply cared for her without expecting anything back, that control became devastating. The remaining raiders retreated quickly once their ships came under fire from Dreesvale's now rallying defenders, disappearing back into the sky as quickly as they had come. The attack was over within the hour, leaving behind damage, but remarkably few injuries thanks to the pair's efforts throughout the chaos. News of the failed raid spread just as fast as everything else had, cementing what many had already begun to suspect. Daniel Ferris was no longer simply a laborer who happened to be chosen by chance. He was, officially and undeniably, the first human dragon bonded in recorded galactic history, a title that came with respect he had never sought and never particularly wanted. That evening, as the camp slowly settled back into quiet, Daniel sat outside his small home, watching the twin suns sink below the horizon. Wisp settled beside him, resting her large head gently against his shoulder, tired but content. He thought about the tribunal, the commander's bitterness, the strange twists of fate that had brought them together over a single dropped stone. None of it had happened the way anyone expected, least of all him. He rested a hand on Wisp's scales, feeling the familiar warmth of their bond hum quietly between them. She had not wanted a warrior, a champion, or a king. She had simply wanted someone who would care for her honestly, without expecting glory in return. In the one person the galaxy had overlooked entirely, she had found exactly that. Together, they watched the suns disappear, neither one needing words to know they had finally found something worth more than any crown, a family.